Okay, this is a video where I'm going to attempt to explain the quote unquote side quests of They Found Glory and how they develop and how they connect. So, looking at the top here, there are 7 major albums of They Found Glory that would be made into books that we could call the main story narrative that is They Found Glory. We have When We Grow Old. Each one deals with a different time period in history. Ben, you know this. This is for anybody else who may watch this. When We Grow Old deals with Vietnam. And you see, I kind of checked off some of the albums that lie in between them for relevance. We have Ben Henry and the Battle of the Sea, deals with the modern day, with the mental health aspects of our modern medicine, as well as Henry Hudson. We have Ponce de Leon. Ponce de Leon happens to be where the vampires get introduced into our story. So a lot of major motifs involving vampires in both the Ghost City Limits narrative and the They Found Glory narrative all ties back to Lord Vladimir and Ponce. We have Climax, which continues the Henry Hudson. We have these other 3 that have yet to be made, but they're still relevant in some way. We have They Ate Their Own, which will deal with the French Revolution as well as a modern World War III type scenario. We have Slash and Burn, which deals with Jack the Ripper, as well as Sherman's March to the Sea in the Civil War. The working title for book number 7 was Just Another Flawed Man, and it deals with Jesus. And then right there we have our end game for at least this main They Found Glory narrative being Caledonia. Things on the sides and on the bottom here, I included some of the major milestones in Ghost City Limits that are relevant to. Right there, I have my GCL. So you see, what do I have here? I have Slip. Moving this way is like towards my end game. I have Elsewhere, The Void, Hell. Some of my like post-life realities, past the Ghost City Limits, main story endgame, Heights and Rooftops. This video was mainly on They Found Glory and the web of our major side quests. One piece of paper could not fill up everything and every little reference or connection from our albums, our books, to our little short stories, our standalone songs, our little trilogies, these like small threads of songs we made. So there are a few major threads, which I would call the side quests, that I feel like build up a big bulk of this. We have our mirror image story. We have our pessimistic resolution / decomposition thing. We have our a lot of the travel themes, especially stuff from Volume 3. We have the gross things. We have our disrespecting woman songs, for lack of a better term. And a few others. I think these are like the major ones, and seeing how these connect really is a good starting point to get you to really understand where this is, what it means, how to interpret it, and where it's all going. So The Return to Caledonia is our first album. This includes My Suffer, Mirror Image. These were supposed to be 2 separate songs. We ended up doing it at one. Mirror Image and My Suffer are basically both about. My Suffer is really just like really angry suffering, similar to pessimistic decompositions, which we'll get to in a moment. Mirror Image is about looking in the mirror and not liking what you see. We continued this mirror image story in our Ben Henry and the Battle of the Sea album. I mentioned the mental health. Basically, Ben Henry and the Battle of the Sea deals with a man who believes that Henry Hudson is talking to him. He sees a therapist named Dr. Montanez, and Dr. Montanez tells this man to um, look in the mirror and tell his mirror image that he loves him. And then the next installment of Mirror Image is our Lover's Cove, which has to do with the end game of Ben Henry and the Ballad of the Sea, and alludes to some of the end game, otherworldly, other reality type stuff that's happening closer to the ending of the story. And Lover's Cove, he finally decides, I can't do it. I can't tell my mirror image you love him. So that book ends, but the mirror image story continues here. And we have a song called Smash the Fucking Mirror, which comes right before My Suffer Revisited. So we have Smash the Fucking Mirror and My Suffer Revisited. That is where the mirror image story ties with the decomposition resolution story. This little storyline that's been going on for a few years as well. That will be very important. After My Suffer Mirror Image, we have Piecing Together the Shards of Glass from Notebook. Oh, these are from our self-titled album, by the way. They Found Glory. That's number 5. Notebook is number 8. And on album 9, we have 2 songs. Guess What's on Fire Now and Refractors. Refractors ties the vampires into the mirror image story, naturally, since vampires can't see their own reflection. So that will tie us back to Ponce de Leon. So what's interesting here is this actually is something I made a sugar-free song, my personal rap project, about. It's called A Tube Connect. So sugar-free, which, like I said, I put sugar-free right here. I related that to Ben's old rap alias, which is, I have it as BTE right there, Ben the Entertainer. And his new rap alias, Stack Monet. Almost like a crossroads sort of happened there, which will come up later. The mirror image story will continue to a song called, where is it? Reflectors. If you notice, I put the REs on a bunch of these songs in capitals, because there are a bunch of songs that we have that start with the letters RE. And all of them have one certain bass riff. If you've heard these songs, that bass riff sounds like, do I have a guitar in this room? I'll just hum it. We've had a bunch of those songs with that bass riff that all start with the letter RE. That certain riff happening represents time going by as these many things are happening. So Reconciliation is the first installment of the RE story. So any song that starts with the letters RE that I've capitalized as part of that. It's also on the Benry album. So it's right there, part of the Benry story. We have a song called Dear Mary, which Dear Mary is on our album Volumes 3. It's one of the singles. That doesn't have, it doesn't start with RE, but it does, however, have the letters RE in the first word. I made a little triangle to connect them there because it does have that riff. That song actually deals with a soldier coming home from World War I, which will connect to more of our stuff. But we have Recollection on Volumes 2, which continues the RE story. We have Reconnecting on Volumes 3, and that's eventually going to come here, where we have Remembrance 3. I'll get to Remembrance in a moment. Reflectors, which I think will be a major milestone, if not the end of the whole mirror image story, continuing off of Refractors, and Rectangles, We also have a thing about shapes. So that's also relevant. Coming back to Return to Caledonia. Oh, before I forget, on our self-titled album, we have Smash the Fucking Mirror, which goes right into My Suffer Revisited. And that goes right into Optimistic Decomposition. These are consecutive songs that kind of tie together. Optimistic Decomposition is probably the most important song to the grander Compost universe that They Found Glory has ever made, because it established the idea of, if I could choose what I'd be reincarnated as when I die, I would be a tree. And later that developed into our whole universe itself being a tree. So that's that ties down to my stuff, Ghost City Limits, and to the greater narrative that They Found Glory as well. The tree thing is like our most important motif. Working backwards from Optimistic Decomp, that's the most updated version of that story. There will be a song called Optimistic Resolution on our upcoming album 13, Return to Caledonia. We have Pessimistic Resolutions and Pessimistic Decomposition. Both Pessimistic Resolutions has to do with being pissed off to the point of suicide and wondering if anyone would care. And it's almost like resolving to die. Decomposition is like the end game, the emotional put to bed, the emotional climax of Return to Caledonia. But you see, we have this theme of resolving, accepting the end, and decomposition, relating back to our plant theme that's kind of been developing forever, that led to the whole tree thing with Compost Universe, and the name Compost Universe itself. The song Horns and Halos, which is actually a Stitched Up song. Stitched Up is another band, The Stitched Up, that I play drums in, with some other people involved in many of these projects. To me, that mirrors the mirror image theme. It's like a mirror between good and evil. It also mirrors... Where is it? It also mirrors Sun and Moon, which I have somewhere on here. The Sun and Moon characters embody the sun and moon. So many of our stories see the sun following the moon, because such is the nature of time. Even Pessimistic Decomposition starts... not Pessimistic Decompositions. My Suffer starts with the line, clocks and watches measure suffering. So there are those things. There's also this song, Reflections in Fun Houses and Bays over here, which are on my Ghost City Limits album, Underpass, part of the Ghost City Limits narrative. So you see, these already start to get very intertwined. This Is How the End Goes kinda alludes back to Pessimistic Resolutions. Some of the guitar and like vocal lines are very similar, and we continue that with a song called Where Are We Now on Volumes 3, with This Is How the End Goes being on Volumes 2. Remembrance. We made a song with our good friend Dylan Ashley, involved in some of my other projects, on an album called Featurama. It was the first song on our Featurama album. We continued Remembrance with Remembrance 2, also with Dylan. Remembrance almost was on Ben Henry, The Battle at Sea, due to the nature of the lyrics. Because the lyrics that Ben made for it literally fit right in with a song like Reconciliation, which would fit right in with that Ben Henry, The Battle at Sea story. But because it was our first song with a feature on it, we chose to use it for Featurama. There will be a third installment of Remembrance 3, and if you noticed, the RE is capitalized, as is the Reflectors. So that RE, the Remembrance narrative, and the Shapes narrative all come together like that. And they're connected to the main story of They Found Gory, as well as the greater overall universal narrative on two different ends. The vampires come into the mirror story on Refractors, which ties us to Ponce de Leon's story. And the mirror image right at the beginning in the second installment tied into our Ben Henry and the Battle of the Steesh story. So I call that, again, a tube connect, which I put right over here. Again, that's on like the edge of the paper because it ties to Sugar Free, which is my rap project. And as I mentioned, a crossroads happens between Ben's old rap name, Ben the Entertainer, and his new rap name, which I believe he's going to be using going forward, Stack Monet. I will update this if that changes. Crossroads ties to Ho. Ho is a song that was originally a short story we wrote. It tells the story. It's on our album Notebook. Where is that shit? Ho. It tells the story of Robert Johnson, as well as a parallel story about his fictional grandfather, happening about 50 years earlier. Robert Johnson's classic tale, his Faustian bargain with the devil. He basically got killed because he fucked some guy's wife, so the hoe refers to a woman being a hoe, tastefully. And also, in the other timeline, a retired Confederate general murders a man with a gardening hoe. He does it because he is choosing to be armed security for a freed black slave in Mississippi, first black business owner there. Again, this is a story we made up to supplement the historical narrative. So the gardening tool hoe as well as the woman hoe. We have a lot of songs that deal with the blues, selling your soul to the devil kind of stuff. We actually made a Robert Johnson trilogy on our self-titled album, They Found Gory. And it starts right after Circles, which comes, as I said, some songs that happen consecutively on the albums do have a loose thread following them. So My Suffer Revisited into Smash the Fucking Mirror, into My Suffer Revisited, into Optimistic Decomp, into Circles. Circles has my dear cousin from Michigan featured on it. It starts our story of Shapes. Following Circles, we go to the Robert Johnson trilogy, which we've kind of followed up and updated with Ho on our Notebook album and a short story we wrote to go with it. So the vampires theme is also tied in with that idea of temptation. A human becomes a vampire living by giving up to temptation for evil, really following the 7 deadly sins: greed and pride and lust, for money, for women. Why would someone sell their soul to the devil? For things like that. So Ho is also tied right to my story, Bounty Hunting Blues. The story actually starts. That's a story with two twin brothers who actually are the sun and moon, coming right from Heights and Rooftops, which is where Ghost City Limits begins. Bounty Hunting Blues, again, the focus on this is more about They Found Gory and our various side quests and how they all connect. However, Bounty Hunting Blues sits right on the edge of where the They Found Gory fables are and the Ghost City Limits narrative. These two brothers, who are relevant in both stories, are the sun and moon. The moon actually is a vampire, and they're both bounty hunters in the Great Depression, which ties us to, again, some of our more bluesy stuff, but the beginning of that book actually happens where Ho ends. We have the fables. So we're telling some short fables. Ben and I have each written 4, and I've started another set, and we're doing them in shapes. So our first was a rectangle, which will bring us back to our REs and right here we have rectangles. Remembrance 3, reflectors, and rectangles will all have that RE riff, the bass riff. Rectangles, our first set of fables was a rectangle. We made 2 stories that were 10 pages and 2 stories that were 20 pages. Money Made on Murder, Hallowed Place, those were my 2 of the rectangle. And Ben made I've Met God and Tom's Money. Tom's Money and Money Made on Murder both deal with greed and just general depravity. There's a serial killer out killing people, and mad people are just making money off of it. Tom's Money deals more with a greedy family fighting over, almost incestually fighting over the wealth of a man who had just passed away. Turned out he had no wealth. So each of the fable shapes that we're making, there's also a square, and I'm working on a 5-point irregular star right now, will tie to one of these shape songs. So our shapes, circles is the first one. We had My Cousin feature on it. We go to squares. The circles again is on self-titled. Squares is on notebook. There is trapezoids on volume 3. There's going to be triangles. And pyramids and diamonds all on our 13 album coming up, and that will bring us to rectangles. There will be more shapes. We will somehow figure out how to represent all the shapes with these short stories and fables. The square fables have, again, Ben and I each wrote 4 equally length stories this time to make a square. Ben made Chatbot, which references Caledonia, which is where our story is going. It also talks about a man using AI to essentially disappear and go into a void, opening up another reality amongst our 7+ dimensions and worlds. That story is called Chatbot. The song for it, I think, is tentatively called Interface. There is also The Pirate of Gaza, which deals with some racial tensions, some adultery, some judgment based on experiences. Pretty fucked up story. Great one. There is my 2, which are Raw and Pride and Joy. Raw is going to be a They Found Glory song. It's also a Ghost City Limits song on my album, Signs of a Civilization Collapsing. Pride and Joy will tie into, I couldn't even fit this on this page, but we're making EPs based on the 7 deadly sins that each have their own little narrative, like Whirlwind, like Collapsing His Shoulders. We're now working on one called Obstacle Course. Each one ties to one of our 7 realities, which in turn ties to one of the 7 deadly sins. So our shapes tie in with all of that. Diamonds kind of ties with blood diamonds, loosely tying into the vampires narrative because of how people would kill each other over diamonds in Ethiopia. Ben writes many real-world historical type songs and stories. So we have Tarred and Feathered, which actually comes right before Smash the Fucking Mirror on our self-titled album. We have Patton. We have another song called Tarred and Fucking Feathered. We have Dear Mary. We have Attack, another song about World War One that's on our album Volumes 1. Many real-world historical songs. We also have a song called Eaten to Death, which references the vampires. It's about a man who basically eats himself to death based on addiction to food and all that. Overindulgence. Both Refractors and Eaten to Death, which were part of a trilogy made with one of our co-producers, Sean Sun, involved in Sun and Moon and The Stitched Up. Both reference the vampires. They're both on our album Volumes 3. Eaten to Death is part of a series of songs about some really gross, nasty things happen to people. We have First Last Period, which is about a girl having her first period, which is also her last period because she bleeds to death. Tasteful. We have a song called Dysentery, which is about someone shitting themselves to death. And now we have Eaten to Death. We also had a little story on Volumes 3 that kind of involves Eaten to Death because we had a funny little song about fried chicken. So, Attack, which I brought up with our real historical kind of stories, involves a character named General Jack who does appear both in my book Elsewhere because he's the reason that a reality like Elsewhere exists because of some stuff he did during World War One. General Jack has a death in When We Grow Old. He is the general of William, who is one of the major characters of our overall story. William is opposite Sarah. In a whole nother reality, Sarah is the demon Jezebel. Both characters are a good and bad, respectively, good and bad representation of time. The shape story, squares, triangles, diamonds, will continue with pyramids. We'll continue with definitely some more shape as well. We have these songs that are really respectful of women on our album Volumes 1. We have Bitch on self-titled. We have Cunt. We have Ho, which is also our Ho story with Robert Johnson. We have Trap, which is about a story about a vampire like taunting somebody in a club in a horrifying night. Again, tying to our vampire story. We have Mistress. We're going to have a song called Thought, which may tie into some things brewing with Ben's rap project. Stack Monet. Point being, they all intertwine somewhere. I could go on and on about all of this, but this is just a brief introduction to how they all interconnect and intertwine. I hope you enjoy.